Oh, it's already recording? Okay.
Yeah.
Shall we pause, or you want to be recording this as well? Okay.
We will allow participants to join. Allowing a couple of minutes for all the participants to join. Welcome everyone. Good evening on behalf of Founder Institute, UAE and GCC. Let's wait for a minute so we have a larger audience. Before we get started, for those who have already joined and attended some of our sessions, the format is 40 minutes of the presentation and 20 minutes of Q&A. So I would definitely request all of you to be more curious about the presentation today and ask as many questions as possible. And we have, we'll pick the top ones and get Vera to, have a response as well from our side. And plus, we have a post-event networking, so we'll paste the link once we are in the middle of the presentation. With that having said, I once again want to extend a warm welcome to all of you and for taking the time to attending Founder Institute session today on Masterclass 6 training by Vera Futorjanski of Veritas Ventures. A quick introduction about Vera. Vera is the CEO and founder of Veritas Ventures. She was part of the team that successfully launched the Dubai Future Accelerator, the largest government accelerator, and managed the MENA region and Russia for 500 startups, now 500 global, including building their entrepreneurship ecosystem in Saudi Arabia. And prior to that, she worked with Rocket Internet, and she led the global comms. And her achievement during that time is, she was involved from a startup to an IPO process. So she's seen the full circle of a startup. And she's been very active in the European Union ecosystem, having studied political science at the London School of Economics and Political Science. And she's part of the expert group on digital platforms and ecosystems for the World Economic Forum. She's also an innovation expert at the United Nations and a responsible leader at the BMW Foundation. With that having said, may I please welcome Vera to commence the session today on the Masterclass. Welcome, Vera.
Thank you so much, Samir. It's a pleasure to be here. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Unfortunately, I can't see you. I was hoping that there would be like little windows and people visible, Samir. I thought that's what we discussed, but actually I cannot see the participants. I was hoping to make this an interactive session. Is there any way to make them visible?
It's a webinar format, Vera. So we'll have to, unmute participants for questions.
All right, so there will be, okay.
And so for the Q&A session, what we can do is we can unmute the participants of the questions we select so we can be more interactive.
Okay, so I will be I'll be sharing. So if you could keep an eye on the questions, Samir, and let me know and pause me anytime, because I really would like this to be an interactive session. All right.
Absolutely.
So
thank you.
Let's start. So the session today is called How to Pitch to Investors. Oh no, how does this? The learning objectives of the session are, I really would like you at the end to be able to articulate the role, the structure, the process of the venture capital and equity investing in new ventures, be able to evaluate a new venture from the perspective of an investor using an investment assessment network that I will share with you as well. And most importantly, to really understand what the investor wants to hear when you pitch your startup. As I said before, I really would like the session to be interactive. It's too bad I cannot see you. I feel like I'm talking to myself. So please raise your hands, ask me questions, write in the chat. Samir will be keeping an eye on that. So really, please be interactive. This is a safe opportunity for you to get an investor perspective. So don't hesitate, please. Shortly about me, Samir already made my introduction. Thank you so much. I'm the CEO and founder of Veritas Ventures. Prior to that, 500 startups, now 500 global, Dubai Future Foundation, Rocket Internet, which is a big venture builder and VC. I was a founder myself, so I've been on your side, in your shoes. So I've seen from this founder side and then ecosystem builder side and then VC. Hence, I hope I can understand where you are and how you feel, and hopefully we'll be able to help you. And I just recently, Samir didn't mention that, joined as a venture partner and advisor to the Founder Institute for the GCC. So it's a pleasure. I have not added your logo here yet, so I need to update this slide, but I shall do so in future. All right, so before we start, let's go over a couple of key concepts. Venture capital, I'm sure all of you know that by now, but let's just kind of bring everybody on the same page. What is venture capital actually? What are we talking about when we say venture capital? So venture capital is equity financing. It means when you bring an investor on board, you give away equity. And I always say, if you don't have to take money yet, don't do it. Try to bootstrap as long as you can, because you don't necessarily want to give away equity. You want to keep as much equity as you can, because as long as you are the majority shareholder, you have voting rights and it's your startup after all. So you don't want to suddenly be in a position where you have a minority equity in your own startup. So really try to bootstrap. Bring angel investors on board, and I'll get more into that. But the moment you get to a point where you need venture capital because you're growing, you have to understand you're giving away equity, but for that you get an investment partner who will be alongside you and who hopefully will strategically assist you in managing risk and help you build a high potential, fast growth and capital efficient company. There are different investment types of funds. I'm just going to minimize this. So there are different types of funds. There are funds that focus on the stage, and I suppose most of you being here with the Founder Institute are at the maybe ideation stage, so very early. There are mid-stage and late-stage funds as well, and I'll get more into that later, but it's really important, and I don't mind repeating this, it's very important that you research thoroughly which fund you target, because normally funds have a certain stage they like to go in at. So it's either early, mid, or late stage. Also, many funds like to focus on a particular sector. When I was with 500, we were a sector agnostic fund. So that's also possible. There are funds that are sector agnostic, but many funds are actually really focused on a particular sector. It can be healthcare, energy, biotech, mobility, you name it. So also really important when you are of a particular sector, do your research, target the fund that focuses on your sector. And the third important area is the geography. Venture capital is a very regional game. So it's really important for venture capitalists to be in the ecosystem, to really understand the market, to get to know the deal flow, to potentially be able to recognize future unicorns. So they're usually geography specific. So also for that, target them depending on your stage, and your sector, and on the geography. And yes, before we discuss how to pitch to investors, let's look at the type and stage of businesses for some context. I suppose you are at the talent, right? So you're all talented entrepreneurs. You wouldn't be here otherwise. You might have given up, well-paid jobs to build a startup that would really create an impact. You might want to bootstrap in the beginning. Like I was saying, don't give up too much equity, and then go to angel investors. Then you get to your seed round, Series A, growth, and then potentially you'll become a unicorn as well. Even though I don't think it's so important, but we'll get into that later. This is just FYI. Also, if you don't yet read Crunchbase news, I really suggest add this to your kind of daily or weekly reading material. It's a really good source of VC startup news, and you get a lot of information. Now, for example, this is just a little picture for you to see how the global venture dollar volume has increased from 2011 to 2020. As you can see, it increased substantially. And it increased a lot in the late stage, also in the early stage. And in general, like you see, we went from, under 100 billion to 300 billion within 9 years. This is from a friend of mine, the founder of 500 Global, Dave McClure. He has some reading materials for those who want to become investors. And this is just FYI for you to see and not take it personally if an investor says no to you, because what investors learn is that most investments fail. And they also have their LPs, limited partners, to report to. So people who gave the money, they manage other people's money. Hence, it's really important for them to make this decision. And that's why sometimes you feel, or maybe you don't feel yet because you're not raising yet, but eventually you'll be raising and you will think, why does it take so long? But it's really important for investors to do proper due diligence, because unfortunately the statistics might be wrong, but until now the statistics was 9 out of 10 startups failed. So this is never personal, it's just an investor trying to also mitigate risk for themselves and their LPs to make sure they invest in startups that will really potentially, exit or IPO. I'll share the slides with you later, so you don't have to kind of, take pictures or write this down. This all will be with you after the session. 3 critical elements that venture capitalists look for is a high potential. Obviously, they want a return on their investments. So a company that can become $1 billion of value at scale. They want a fast growth. Usually a fund has a life cycle and it's between 7 to 10 years. So venture capitalists hope to invest in startups that will return the money to the investors within that time frame. And of course, capital efficient. Also, if you look at risk and valuation, with the risk going up, the valuation, with the risk going down, the valuation goes up. So that's why many people, almost prefer to invest at late stage just because the risk is so much lower. But luckily, there are also people like, the FI and other VCs, and so especially angel investors who really come in early because they believe in founders and they really want to help to make it work. So now we have this question. So what are investors looking for? And I wish this would be interactive because I'd like to see a couple of answers. Actually, let me open the chat. What do you guys think the investors are looking for? Anybody? Size of the market, long-term growth, TAM, return on investment. Yeah, return. So you guys know that when investors are looking, they want to see the money. So show me the money. Basically, they want to see the return on investment for their LPs. But all the other answers were correct as well, and we'll get more into details. So investors are trying to find this. I'm sure you guys know who this is as well. Let me see in the chat. Anybody knows who this is? All right, I'm sure you do. Exactly. So, but how do you go from, as an investor, to go from this dorky guy at Harvard who is building something he thinks will be big, but you don't know because nothing like that existed before, to actually become this multi-billion-dollar company, right? So investors are trying to find that. They're trying to find founders who will build big businesses in huge markets that will become household names. And I'm sure we know many of those. It's Facebook, it's Airbnb, it's Uber, it's what we use, probably we all have our phone, with those apps that are big household names now. And that's what investors are looking for because obviously it's a big return. Having said that, I'm not gonna get into detail, but luckily, there are also a lot of investors now looking into impact investment. And impact investment doesn't necessarily bring such a big, they don't become necessarily billion-dollar companies, but they really create social impact. But that's a topic for a different webinar. We'll focus on the kind of the regular VC structure. So they're looking for people like Mark Zuckerberg, for founders that will create billion-dollar companies, and they're trying to avoid this. Anyone knows who this is? Elizabeth Holmes, exactly. There's Elizabeth Holmes from Theranos. I'm sure you know the stories. She managed to raise so much money from really prominent investors. She had backing from people with big names, just because not enough due diligence was done. And since then, there's much more due diligence, especially in the healthcare sector. And I think she's now on trial. So investors are trying to avoid this now. In fact, investors are trying to avoid inflated valuations as well. But it's much harder than it looks. This is a company, Airbnb, and the guys from Airbnb have reached out to so many investors, and it's difficult to read, but you can read it later on your slides. So many investors have said no to them because they just could not understand the value proposition. They were like, why would somebody want to rent a room in my house, if there are hotels to go to? So they struggled in the beginning, believe it or not. Now they are, successful multi-billion-dollar company, but in the beginning, a lot of investors. And they actually once published, I think, an article showing all the emails that came back to them from some of the investors who we know as well, who did not recognize the opportunity and said no to the investment. As I said before, the majority of VC investments fail, and that's why the investors are so careful, because they are managing other people's money. So what are they looking for? What are they looking for, and what do you need to have in order to actually secure investments? So they have various frameworks to think through that will help them form an opinion. And usually it's something like this. So what they want is a team, people who are really passionate, who want to make it work, who have the expertise, who know how to make it work, a product that is very timely, and a market opportunity. And if you align all of this and you get onto the red spot, then you're probably building the future unicorn. But it definitely is very difficult to know beforehand. Yeah. Then let's try to get into investors' mind. What is happening in this black hole when you're actually pitching to them? And I think all of you are getting ready for your pitch. I think the demo day is next week. So hopefully some of this will be useful to you. Like I was saying before, investors are looking for clues that the team has the ability to execute and do it well and fast. Of course, it's also a game of who can do it faster, first mover advantage, even though sometimes in certain markets, first mover can be also a disadvantage. When I was building a startup in the UAE, it was an app to book beauty appointments online. I was the first one to do something like that in the UAE, in the region. And it was very, very hard, because I would go to, let's say, people who own salons or spas, and they wouldn't really understand this new revenue channel there. I was competing against pen and paper. They're like, we have paper, we have pen, why do we need this app? So first mover can be really tough. You spend a lot of time with education. So you need to educate people if you're building something new, but usually it's worth it. All right, the first investor meeting is like a first date. And what is the point of a first date? Can somebody in the chat write to me, what's the point of a first date? Thank you. So much needed encouraging stories such as Airbnb. Exactly. So don't give up, because so many investors have said no to companies that are now performing really well. All right. Dave Lucas seems to have many dates, so he knows. The first investor meeting is like a first date, because you want to get to a second date. Yes, you guys all got it. You want to get to a second date. You want to make a good impression. Let's see who else know about the date. Yeah, research. So the first investor meeting is like a first date, because you want to get to a second date. So you need to carefully articulate what you communicate with investors and try to demonstrate it as well. So how do you do that? Important is to focus on clear, simple, and memorable messages. I always say, you should not be selling a product or service. You have to sell an opportunity. You have to sell a story. And I just recently saw this example. I'm advising a startup, and they were focusing on, just getting straight to what is the problem, what is the solution. And I advise them, start with your story, start with your why. I'm sure you know Simon Sinek, right? Find your why. If you haven't watched his short talk on YouTube, I really recommend. Is your why is so important. It's not what you do, it's why you do it, I think he says. So I really recommend you watch that. It's wonderful. It's really, oops, wait, we're not there yet. I just lost the chat. Oh, there it is, okay. So it's really important that you know your why and you communicate it, make it personal, capture the imagination, really try to get to the emotional sides of the investors. And that's where the research comes in. And that's so important to research, because I know that there was a startup I was speaking to, and they were speaking to an investor, and they researched the investor beforehand, and they knew that the investor's sister had something similar health-wise. So they were able to connect with that investor on an emotional level because they knew that his sister went through something similar. So it's I really suggest, knowing your why, capturing the emotional part. All right, usually you start with your introduction, and you need to have a catchy introduction. You need to capture the attention of your audience. Usually they say what? I mean, I don't remember the statistic, but like you have a few seconds, 8 seconds maybe, to capture the investor. If you don't capture them, they'll be back on their phones in like no time. So connect emotionally, use language that is timely. And while you do that, what's on the bottom is what's happening in this black hole of the investor. They're looking at you, they hear your name, they hear value proposition, so they think it's an interesting name, the value proposition, but I don't quite get it. You also have to really understand you are in your startup and what you do day in, day out. You're the expert. The investor you go to is not an expert at all. So you are actually the expert. That's another thing, as a side note. Whenever you go into meetings, go really confidently, because you know what you're talking about much better than most other people, and have this confidence about you that you are actually educating other people. I mean, I love listening to startups just because I feel like I learn something new every time, because it's impossible to be so deep into every topic like you guys are, so usually, I mean, I consider myself a generalist. I'm not an expert on anything. So I love talking to people who are building something in healthcare and education and mobility, because they are really experts of what they do. But then, of course, every investor, or most investors, have the focus area as well. We'll get to that again. So make sure you make it relevant. Why is this relevant to the investor? Really point that out and explain it in very simple terms. I mean, I'd like to do an exercise at the end. I'll see if I have time. All right. So that's on the introduction. Then you go to the problem you're solving. What is the problem that you're solving? Why is this relevant? Why should somebody care about it? What is the market size and growth? The investor during that time thinks, okay, I can see there's a problem there. Is this a real pain point that affects a lot of people? How big can it get? They don't know. So you need to tell them that. Even if you think you're being too basic, don't. It's better to be basic than too high up and lose the attention of people. If you start throwing in names that they don't understand, people usually lose attention. All right, so after you've done an introduction, you laid out the problem, what the problem is. You propose your solution. You say, this is my value proposition. This is the product, and this is the business model. So the investor thinks, okay, yeah, I see they're onto something, I'm interested. But what exactly is the business model? Is it scalable? Surely there must be others who are working on it. How are they unique? They're starting about it already before you get to that point. That's why, so you kind of get the investor to think of a certain thing while you were talking about the solution. Of course, a human mind works like that. People start thinking, but why would you be able to do that? So that's where you have to answer that question, even though it was not asked loudly, potentially. You talk about the differentiation. What sets you apart from the competition? And please read it. That's super important. Don't say there's no competition. It happened to me so many times. I had startups pitching to me who said there's no competition out there. Unfortunately, by saying that, you lose a lot of credibility, because there's always competition out there. It's either you didn't do research or you're lying. And none of that is a really good sign for the investor. Unless there really is no competition because you're building the new, something that doesn't exist yet. It's possible, but then you really need to convince. But most of the time, it's actually really not bad to have competition, because if somebody else is building it, then there definitely is a market for it. So do not be afraid of competitors. It's actually great to have competition. You just have to become better than the competition. So while we talk about that, the investor mind is thinking, okay, I can see how you compare to others, but tell me about, tell me about your numbers. And then to that, you go to why you, why now. And this is super important. You have to present your team, right? In the end, and I'll say it in the end as well, the team really matters. So you have to present your extraordinary team. You have to say why you're uniquely qualified, why you're the best to deliver this. You show the team track record. You show your expertise, and the timing is important. So why you? Yes, it's the team. And why now? The timing is super relevant. So during that time, the investor is thinking, I need to see that you have the experience, because I mean, they're giving you their money, so they want to make sure you make it work. If you're building something in healthcare, it's probably going to be difficult if you say until now you were, I don't know, building planes, right? So hold on, somebody raised their hand. I cannot see you, unfortunately, Yash. So Samir, can you message the person asking for the question, maybe? For now, we can see.
Yeah, I cannot see anybody raising a hand, so.
I just received like a little notification says Yash was raising. Oops.
Okay. So yeah, let's keep the Q&A once we are done with the presentation.
Okay,
so
perfect.
We can
And
get
guys,
more time.
Yeah, if you have questions, why don't you write in the Q&A already? Because one thing is the chat, but there's also the Q&A. So start putting your questions in the Q&A and we'll get to them so we don't forget.
Sure, thank you.
Does that sound like a good deal? Like a good plan? Aziz is asking how we get the presentation. I'll send this to you. So there's no issue. Oh, and I see there's a friend. Hi, Safide. Okay, so why you, why now? We discussed that. Then you get to the plans and measuring success, so your KPIs, and that's really important. What have you achieved so far? So you talk about what has been done, what are you doing now, where are you on your roadmap, and what will you be doing next? So a roadmap is really important with, months, years. So an investor can see you have a dream, you have a vision, but you're not just a person who dreams, you have also to be somebody who will be able to execute. So you have a roadmap and you know how to achieve them, and you will be deploying resources to increase value, decrease risk. So it's not enough to only have a vision, you have to be able to show how you're actually going to make this a reality. Yeah, so not just being a dreamer, but being a doer as well. At that stage, I was hoping we'll do a little exercise, but it's not possible in this webinar setting, so maybe later on, but just for you, think about, this is just a quick summary of what I did. So when you prepare your pitch, first start with your why, so that's your story, and then talk about problem, solution, why you, why now, roadmap, and at the end, it's really important, you have to have a call to action. Sometimes I get decks or I get emails, and it's describes the startups and what they do, and that's it. And I'm like, okay, what am I supposed to do with this information? What is the call to action? So whenever you email somebody, get the person to understand what is it that you're asking for. Are you asking for money? Are you sharing information? It's really important for the receiver to understand why are they, the receiver of this email. All right, just some investor 101. I always say, always be fundraising. However, there's a big difference. It doesn't mean be asking for money, but keep the relationship going. And to build, keeping the relationship going, you have to build the relationship, and that's super important. And we'll get more into that. And once again, because I find this is the most important thing, you really have to research who are the right investors for you and target the right ones. You segment your investors by size, type of investment. Okay, so, I give you a little life hack, what I usually do. You put an Excel sheet together or, Google Docs, whatever, works for you. And you segment by size, type of investment, interest, domain, sector, geography, everything that works for you. And you write down, the ones you like to do all the way to the bottom, you research more. And then when you start you start targeting them, you start from the bottom. So you first go to the investors that you don't really care so much about because you need to practice. Do not go to the most important investor in the beginning. By the time you get to your top 5, hopefully you'll be amazing, that your pitch will be on point and you'll be just, it will be impossible to say no to. So create your list and start from the bottom, right? Practice, practice, practice. It's so important. Even if you feel my pitch is great, at 500, we used to get startups to pitch in the beginning, then we would run the accelerator and get them to pitch at the end. And it was like night and day. They were so good at the end because you need to practice. No matter how good you think you are, you'll be reiterating, you'll be changing. and you have to adapt it to the particular audience. Are you pitching an investor because you need money? Or are you pitching an investor because you want to start building a relationship? So you have to adapt the narrative depending on who you pitch to. Also, one important thing to keep in mind, when you start fundraising, it's so important who you get on your cap table. You cannot change your investors. You can change your employees. You can even change your co-founder, but you cannot change your investors. It's so difficult to buy them out. So be super careful about who you bring on board. It's, you're there together for a long time. So it's super, super careful. All right, then I would like to share some do's and don'ts with you. We're still on time, so all good. Whenever you pitch, do follow up, engage, comment, in fact, engage. That's a really relevant one as well. How do you start engaging? Let's see. Can we please have some people comment in the chat? How would you engage with investors? Okay, cold emails, LinkedIn, networking, ask for feedback. But even before you can, let's say you don't have the investor's email or number, or you're not connected on LinkedIn, okay, comment on a LinkedIn post, friends, okay, friends' recommendation, you follow the webinars, oh, good one, Ant. Okay, so I think, those are really great comments. You guys know what you're onto, but also really a good way to get noticed by investors is to start engaging on their posts, for example, on Twitter. Investors are super active on Twitter. I'm not, but many investors are very active on Twitter, on social media. So start engaging with them, share relevant information, because we're all humans, right? We don't have full time of the day. Maybe you found an article that you think will be interesting for them, then send it to them. But having said that, let's not overdo it either, because I'm on that side of the table and I receive a lot, and sometimes it can get too much. So I feel like it's important to use the common sense. You engage, you start building the relationship, you comment, you share. It's always kind of give before you ask. I think this is something that has been a mantra for me, all my life, and it has worked really well. Gosh, I have so many books that come to mind, but I know I have to focus on this and we can talk about it at the end. So engage, comment, give useful advice, share. And once you're already in touch with them and you manage to get on their email list, and update them on developments, even if they're not investing yet because maybe it doesn't fit their stage because you're too early for them, just keep them updated. That way when you eventually need the money, they already will know about you, and it's much easier to get money from somebody who knows you already. Yes, Kylie says, build a presence online in your industry via Twitter, 100%. Try and find out what they're interested in. Exactly. Okay, then important is to build a relationship and nurture that relationship. And, maybe it sounds easy, but it's really tough actually to build relationships, because it's a very fine line from kind of harassing somebody, trying to build a relationship, and actually being there, present, and that they don't forget you. So like I was saying before, it's important to use your common sense. Engage in a way that is interactive, kind of open, but without kind of, I know it's all very vague, because I cannot just give you 3 points. This is what what to do when you want to build a relationship, but important is just, I feel like if I say, email them too much, and then all the kind of my investor friends will chat to me and say why did you say that? But I think on social media will be best. So really start building a relationship, show yourself, really position yourself as an expert. When they realize, oh, this guy really knows about AI, or this girl really knows about future of work, they potentially reach out to you for advice when they need to give a talk on a particular topic, or when they have a startup they're looking at. So nurturing this relationship, and once you actually get to know the investor, ask about their children, remember the names of the wives and the children, or the dogs and cats. This really works. People are, we're all human. People like when you remember certain things about them, their birthdays, or their any important days. So that's how you nurture a relationship. You really nurture a relationship by showing up, by being there, and by giving first. I shared this life hack earlier with you already because I think it's really important. But like I said, practice on those you don't want. Really start from the bottom of your list, create that list. It might take time, but it's really important. Get yourself from the beginning a certain database where you will be writing down all the investors. Don't do it sporadically in a message, on an email. Really start a database because you'll need this going forward. You'll be updating it. You can add the days when you reached out to a certain investor. You can potentially add, his birthday or her birthday. You can add, names. You can add relevant, their interests. So really update that and use that as your system really to build up your database. And I recently shared on my Twitter a database of investors. Samir, I can send it to you. Maybe you can share with the group if you have everybody's emails.
Sure.
Okay, and then once you manage to get the investor interest, so even before you reach out and ask, let's say for an email or a call, have all your documents ready, because the worst thing that can happen if you reach the investor, you manage to get a meeting and then you actually don't have the documents ready. Whenever you have a meeting, it's really important you don't waste the other person's time. Because everybody's busy, and it's important that if you manage to get this, say those 15 or 30 minutes, really come prepared. Maybe even send an agenda beforehand. Don't send too many documents beforehand. I know it from my own experience. If somebody sends something and says, please read this beforehand, it usually doesn't happen. We don't have time to read things beforehand. So just send something very short, either just prior to the meeting or during the meeting, with bullet points, not too many attachments. In general, if you can avoid attachments, that's better. Later on, if you need to attach your decks, of course, you attach them. But if it's just something about your startup and bullet points, just do it in a bullet point format in an email. It's much easier to read. Then some don'ts. Usually, I say don't cold email. If you can, avoid it. However, it does work sometimes. Recently, an Egyptian startup raised money from Sequoia, and that was via a cold email. So it can happen. But most of the time it does not. Usually it comes via recommendation. And the recommendation is really, sorry, 1 second, let me have a sip of tea. I'm in Berlin and it's rather cold here. A recommendation really brings you a long way. I can give you a personal example of what happened just now. A good friend of mine who is quite a well-known journalist here in Europe for a tech publication recommended me to a big conference that's happening now early November. And because it came via recommendation, I didn't even check any credentials, not even my LinkedIn or CV. They just reached out to me and asked, could you MC the whole first day? It's Web Summit. So I'm going to be MCing at the Web Summit, just because it came via recommendation. And it's going to be the same in your case. If you come via recommendation, I mean, if a good friend of mine sends me a recommendation of somebody, of a startup, I make sure I really look at it. If it comes in an email or LinkedIn, I mean, unfortunately, there are so many emails a day, most of the time, it won't even be opened. So try to get recommendations. Also, what happens a lot, you'll be surprised, many of you are laughing right now, but using the wrong name, you cannot imagine how many emails I receive with "Dear Sir." I'm like, really? That's it. I don't even read further. If you made that mistake, that you don't even check that I'm a woman, or you just copy paste, or I received an email saying, "Dear, I don't know, Jonathan," or "Dear, any name, any male name." So that means a person is copy pasting emails or copy pasting messages on LinkedIn and just sending them directly. That to me shows you didn't do enough research. You didn't really put time into it. So that's a really bad kind of first impression. And usually if that person even comes back, the first impression really matters. That's why I tell you, start from the bottom. Don't pitch the investors you really want, because you need to build up first. And it's really important with the ones you want, you're properly prepared. Another important one, don't write an essay. If somebody needs to scroll down even once, it's already too long. It should be, when the investor opens the email, it should be visible on one kind of, just on the screen. If one needs to be scrolling down and it's like 16 paragraphs, I mean, that's a bit long. So really try to keep it short. one of the best qualities, in people in general is to really be very succinct, short, to the point, precise, and an easy, simple language. Even if you feel, oh my gosh, I'm being too simplistic. No, it's better to keep it simple. Do you know the KISS principle? KISS stands for keep it simple, stupid. So it's really important to keep it simple. So just really stick to simple language. Another one really important is don't lie. You don't need to say everything. Even if you're being asked certain things, then just don't reply, but don't lie about numbers or about how much funding you raised, just because, in the end it comes out, and that's just, if you break trust, it's very difficult to rebuild. So it's better not to break trust from the beginning. But ultimately, all of that we discuss so many things, but really it comes down to the team. That's the most important. The team is the one who, makes or breaks a startup. It can be an amazing idea, but if the team is not great, it's not going to work. So it comes down to the team and the investor's perception of the founding team's ability to execute. So this is really important. Is this the team? The doc images, and yeah, you got this. I'm rooting for you. So I'm really on time. Wow, German efficiency. All right, I'll stop sharing here.
Yeah.
And I'm open for questions.
Brilliant. So what I'm gonna do, I'm just going to hit the Q&A box. May I request all of the participants to just pop in their questions into the Q&A box. It's easier to start answering them. And I'll also, promote some of the interesting, smart questions to, to actually ask the questions in person, so that, if you have a follow-up question, that can be answered. So let me open.
You can upvote, or you don't have the upvote quality.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. You can, you can upvote as well.
Thank you so much, Timothy.
Numbers.
This is a great presentation. Thank you, Mohammed. I'm happy it was used. All right, so I can see in the Q&A.
So we have, okay, brilliant. Yeah, you want to do it, Vera, from your end?
Yeah. So
okay,
Mohammed
go ahead.
Yeah, I am already. Mohammed is asking, should I list all my team members or just the founders? I suppose this is in the team, for the team. It depends on what you're building, but I think it makes sense. Unless you have 30 people on the team, of course, you don't put all the 30, but let's say you have a CMO, you have a CPO, CTO, COO. I suggest to list more people. It's great to have the founders, and you can say those are, this is me and my co-founder or my two co-founders. In general, I can tell you investors prefer more than one founder. They usually like to have two founders, just for, because it's difficult, it gets really difficult. So to have somebody to, help you and, have a partner in that is helpful. So it depends on how many team members you have, but let's say if it's 5 or 6, I would list all of the team members, especially if they're really relevant, especially if, one of them has certain expertise that is really relevant for your startup or to the investor. Okay, I'm jumping between the chat and the Q&A. What's in the chat? Oh, it's the thank yous. Thank you so much. What to send you the pitch? Okay. Anshuman is asking what to send you the pitch. Okay, guys, I need to say, as you know, so if you have done your research, I look into the well-being space. So, I do look agnostically, but depending on what stage you are, but I personally prefer more the well-being space, which includes meditation, mental health, but also food technology. So those are the spaces I'm looking into. However, if you are...
Go ahead, Vera.
If you are a startup that is really making something incredible, and this is validated, not just by you, but by other people as well, do send me the pitch. Samir can later share my email with all of you, or I can put it in the chat later. Dave is asking, how do you get a recommendation if you don't know anybody? Well, as I was saying before, Dave, you start commenting on Twitter, you start engaging, you need to start engaging, you need to build your network. You must have been building your network somehow. You go on LinkedIn, you see if somebody knows that person. You go to events now. It's of course more difficult, but there are online events. Potentially, you look who the speakers are, you comment on when they give a speech. You know, you need to start engaging. That's the way to build a network, and building a network in no matter what. I don't know what stage you are, of course, but if you don't have a co-founder, of course, you know, you don't have a co-founder. It's very difficult to find a co-founder. And I realized that you should not be putting your business on hold and just looking for a co-founder. I would start with angel investors anyway. You know, as I said before, do not go to a VC directly. Look for angel investors. Angel investors can help you much more hands-on. They can be more involved in the startup because they come in early, because they want to mitigate risk. They want to support you. They want to, some will want to maybe be even involved operationally, but if not operational, they'll be with you and that will help you. So that's where you can get advice. You're angel investor, or you can create advisors that you can, you know, potentially well discuss whether you give shares or how you work with advisors. But those advisors, and that's also, you know, Dave, to you before, how to build a network. You ask your advisors to support you in that, you know, network building and reach to investors. As a social entrepreneur, Adi is asking, when bootstrapping the social enterprise, you might not have a dedicated team. How will this impact your pitch? If you don't have a team yet, how will that impact your pitch? I mean, if you yourself, Adi, are, you know, all you need, then you should be fine. But in general, we always need a team to build something, right? So it would be eventually good to look for the team. But at that stage, you probably will not go to investors, because if you don't have a team yet, would you really want to get investor money, VC money? You probably would want to go to an angel investor. Maybe as a social entrepreneur, you go for a grant. You know, grants are also a good opportunity. Sometimes, especially if you're social entrepreneurship sectors, it's not necessary to look at VC directly. Look at grants that you know, your country or big you know, global organization give to startups that are creating change in the social entrepreneurship space. For example, I think Expo Life, I don't know where you're based, but if you're Dubai, Expo Life is giving grants. The World Bank give grants to emerging countries. So it really, you have to research. You know, the most important thing, and I know this can be tiresome and annoying, but you have to do a lot of research. That's the most important. You need to find who are the potential institutions, foundation, NGOs that invest in your sector if you're a social entrepreneur. And there are so many networks also who support social entrepreneurs. So really look into that. Hussam is asking, kindly advise about the most active platforms or events that are including serious investors. I mean, it depends on where you're based. If you're in Dubai, look, the GITEX is coming up, right? So you potentially want to go to GITEX. There will be a lot of investors there. STEP is a good conference as well that's happening in the UAE. You have a lot in Saudi. I mean, I don't know where you're based, but every country has, you know, events, and there's so much. I mean, the beauty, not the beauty, but the silver lining of COVID was that a lot of it moved online. So you don't have to be present anymore. For example, before that, I mean, and I heard it from many investors as well, that the silver lining of COVID was they started looking at countries that are way beyond their usual geography. For example, most of California-based VCs, they never looked at emerging markets. And now, look, we have Sequoia investing in an Egyptian startup. This is amazing, right? So it's it didn't happen before. Before, they probably didn't even know where Egypt is on the map. So now they're actually investing in a startup from there. So you can be sitting, you know, in the comfort of your home and attending a conference, which is, a lot of them are free as well, online, and then engage with people there. And actually, I found that it can be quite easy to engage online. You know, it takes away the shyness for many people, because many entrepreneurs are also introverts, and it's easier for them to approach people online. course, there's questions between the chat and the Q&A. Samir, maybe you can help me as well.
Yeah, I think Vera, let's focus on the Q&A box rather than the chat, because I think I think we've requested all of them to paste their questions in the Q&A box, so it becomes one source rather than juggling. So let's you know,
only Q&A.
Yeah, only Q&A. Let's focus on. So maybe I'll take this question. Do you have incubators that could support those who may not get investors, showing the proof that they are busy with a specific project, solving and you know, in what does it say, environmental problems? So you know, wherever you want to take this, incubators who are kind of long-term business players supporting the idea for long-term growth, and if it's related to ESG, how they're asking, how could you you know, what's your opinion on that?
I mean, Samir, I think you're running an incubator for FI. Maybe you take this question because you probably know about the incubators more than I do. Yeah.
So FI is an accelerator program which actually takes an idea to a company in 14 weeks. There are specific environmental, social, and governance. Now the investment is moving towards ESG, and there are specific incubators, accelerators, solving the ESG, solving for the ESG using UN Sustainable Development Goals. FI's core theory is also using your business model and really highlighting your key SDGs and helping you, you know, reach a stage where you can not only create impact but raise investment. So I think the first step is to accelerate your idea using programs like FI or others who can, in a short period of time, help you validate your idea, and then go to a long-term incubator. And there are many in the UAE and in the region who can then help support your idea and with investment, with little investment, more in kind, not in cash, to help then move into a growth phase for your business. I hope that helps. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Then I'd like to answer Kylie's question. Kylie is asking, can you talk about some of the startup ecosystems you have been closely involved with? UAE, Berlin, DC. I mean, DC I would know. I've never built an ecosystem in the US, but I can talk about the UAE ecosystem. So I think it's really up and coming. I remember when I was with Dubai government and we would travel to the US, most of the time the US investors didn't even want to talk to us because they were like, what's happening with you besides, you know, war and destruction in the region. And now you see all those international investors looking at the region, which is, I mean, I find it's really inspiring and also motivating for many founders. And we had recent successes, you know, Uber buying Careem. Well, it's been a few years already. Also, you know, Amazon buying Soup.com. Recently, Delivery Hero bought InstaShop, and we had some, you know, Nasdaq listings, and we had investors, and we had the largest amount ever raised by a cloud kitchen company, Kitopi. So it's really, it's moving a lot in the region. The UAE government has a lot of incentives for entrepreneurs. Kyle, I don't know where you're based, but you might want to look into Hub 71 in Abu Dhabi, for example, that really works on attracting talent to the UAE. Same for Dubai Future Foundation, where I used to work before. Saudi Arabia is also putting a lot of incentives for founders, but also for emerging managers. A lot of new funds are being launched. A lot of money is being put into innovation in general. In the Middle East as a whole, or GCC rather, the whole concept of diversifying from oil, creating, you know, really betting on innovation going forward. So I can definitely talk about that. Whereas Berlin, I mean, I was with Rocket Internet before, contributed a lot to the, you know, building the ecosystem here. A lot of kind of former founders, which I'm also one of them, who left Rocket, went to, you know, either build their own companies or build ecosystems globally. So Berlin is a very, very vibrant ecosystem, has been already before when I moved away 7 years ago, but still is now. a lot of new things. Why? Because Berlin is cheap. It's the cheapest capital in Europe. It's very easy to find talent. It's a lot of talent here. It's cheaper to hire talent in Berlin than elsewhere in Europe. Maybe Lisbon could be comparable, but Lisbon became quite expensive as well, especially since Web Summit moved there. But Berlin is definitely a great place if you want to build a startup because it's cheap to live. I mean, you have to keep in mind Dubai and Abu Dhabi can be quite expensive, you know, as living standards. But they offer you other incentives, you know, potentially co-matching of your of what you raise. So a lot of vibrant ecosystems, and not just in Berlin, but also in Lisbon, like I mentioned, is really coming up. France is giving a lot of incentives to founders as well. The French leadership is also pushing a lot on the innovation side. Macron has a lot of like regulations that are quite in favor of entrepreneurs. And then you have a lot of entrepreneurs in Egypt. I mean, Egypt is the largest population in the Middle East, of course. And they, I mean, I've seen amazing startups coming out of the country. Same for Jordan. In fact, I'm traveling to Jordan tomorrow, very much looking forward to that. And so yeah, it's really, it depends on what you want. You need to look into what are you building, who is interested in that, where could you potentially get funding. You know, it's going back to the research, but in which country do you want to get money from the government or from private investors? Do you want to build something with the government? For example, GCC would, you know, looks a lot into working with startups as well. It's public sector rather than private sector. So yeah, a lot of kind of to look into. Samir, so you answered Tanda's question on incubators? Okay, so that's done then.
Yeah, I did. And I think there is another interesting question by Anshuman about crowdfunding. So I'd like to get your view as well, Vera, on crowdfunding.
You know, I can't really give an educated opinion because I've never done it myself. I've never crowdfunded for my own startup, and the startups I advise, which are quite a few, never crowdfunded either. I mean, I know of others that have. So if you're building something that people are interested in, and you know, those crowdfunding platforms can be quite, you know, successful. You can raise quick. However, I really think that if I were, you know, advise a startup, I think trying to find an angel investor is probably how I would go forward, because you actually get somebody you can talk to. You get a real person who either has, you know, a network in that area or who has potentially operationally been involved in that area. You need to get smart money, right? So you don't want to just fast, quick money. You need to get smart money, because in the beginning, it's very difficult. You need to know, you know, what to do with the money when you get it, like how to actually build and how to build your MVP, how to, you know, potentially reiterate again. So I always think, you know, if you can find an advisor, an angel investor who would be able to guide you, is the best way forward. Rakesh is asking,
sharing
email when asked for confidential information after meeting with an investor. I mean, confidential information would be your data room, maybe. Is that what you're referring to? I wouldn't email the data room straight away. I think you need to potentially get an NDA signed. So don't email everything, right? Even if investor is asking you, you can answer some questions. Like I say, you know, answer questions, be transparent, be open, show that you really want to build this relationship, but also don't be stupid, right? Don't share the information that you don't want to share. So unless, you know, you can, I know many investors don't like building an NDA, but before sharing really important confidential information, I would build a relationship. Okay, Samir, we have 2 minutes left.
I would encourage, if you have any questions or any questions about Founder Institute, you know, I'd like to add a plug. Our next
oh, Samir, you froze for me. I don't hear anymore.
Batch commences on October 26th. Very welcome on board as our venture partner and advisor. I think there is a problem with the connection. So yeah, we're very fortunate and thrilled to welcome Vera. Our next cohort starts on the 26th of October. Applications are open till the 19th of October. If you want to apply, fi.co/UAE is your way to go. We have some great founders already enrolled, and we welcome you to apply and kind of take benefit of our mentor pool and you know, our guidance to build a sustainable, impactful company. So yeah, look forward to meeting. If you don't have any questions, let's join the Air Meet. The Air Meet link has been shared in the chat. Yeah, if you have any closing comments, Vera, if you have any closing comments.
Thank you, Samir, because I just saw from Sepideh a message saying, well, lovely to see you as well. Could you do a webinar about how to become a successful investor for startups? I mean, I think, and maybe, I don't know, it's the imposter syndrome, but I don't think I'm there yet. I need to invest in a couple of more. I have invested in a few, but they have not become unicorns yet. So I wouldn't really consider myself a successful investor yet. But I think it's really, it's important to start investing if you have some money which you potentially can allocate, because so many founders have so many great ideas, and often comes down to them not having money. And that's why I find if people are in a position to support founders, be it, you know, with advice, or be it with money, or with the networks, and they have the capacity as well, the resources, because I mean, yeah, it's yeah, you have to also have like use your yeah, I mean, it's impossible to help everyone, you know. I'm in the same boat. I wish I could help you all, but unfortunately it's, you know, it's difficult. But if those of you who are on this chat and you can support each other, I mean, Samir, is this an international group, or is it all UAE?
GCC? Yeah, it's an international group, and
Okay.
and sorry, we are actually ahead of time by a minute. So if you have,
can you share my email? Do you have all sign-ups? Maybe you can just, I'll send you the presentation. So everyone who's listening, I'll share the presentation with Samir. It will be a PDF, and then he'll share the presentation with you with my email. Feel free to connect me on LinkedIn. My name is on the Zoom, Vera Futorjanski. Please write a little note that you connected because you listened to this webinar. And yeah, and then I wish you best of luck with startups. I hope, you know, yeah, do reach out, do keep me updated how your startups are going. I wish we would have had more time, because I would have loved to hear a couple of pitches. Do go through that exercise I sent, and good luck next week. So in fact, next week there will be a demo day, and I will be judging the UAE and the Zurich one the next day. So if any of you will be pitching there, do let me know, and I'm looking forward to listening to your pitches. Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, Vera, and thank you to all the founders who attended. I hope it was useful. Do follow us on our social media channels, where you'll get all information about this presentation, the links to the recording, as well as a direct connect to Vera. So yeah, thank you very much, and have a good night. Thank you. Thanks, Vera.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.